Hi, my name's Teresa. I'm the owner of New Forest Sewing Studio. So each month we do a monthly make, and for this month we're going to make the Friday Pattern Company Davenport dress in some of our Mind the Maker Tencel Twill fabric, which is a nice weight fabric. Do it in several different colourways. So this is the colourway Pond. This colourway. Lovely names. One's called Frog. It's quite nice names. Okay, so the first thing it wants us to do is to make the ties on the dress. So we've got that one, sorry. So we've got the drawstring M piece here. So you'll cut two of those, and it just literally wants you to join them together at the one of the short ends. Okay, so join both sides, right sides together, stitch a 1 centimetre seam allowance, and then press that seam allowance open like that. Okay, and then next it wants you to stitch all the way down this long edge. So again, right sides together. We're going to pin that all the way down the length there. All the way down, just pin all down those edges. I won't do it all because it makes the video really long, but I'll do a little bit and show you. Give it a press in the iron as well. So just pin all those edges, right sides together, all the way down that length. Okay, and then it just wants you to stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down that outer seam to enclose those two edges together. Okay, and then it tells you to turn it inside in the right way with a safety pin. So we'll have a go with that in a minute. The next bit I've just got ready as well. So the next bit is you've got your neckline facing, which is piece C. Okay, here, it just wanted you to neaten the edge around the edge of that. I've chosen to overlock mine. You can zigzag, you can bind the seam, all sorts, depends how you want to neaten your edges. Okay, so I've done that bit, and then it wants you to attach that around the neckline edge to the bodice front, which is piece A. Okay, so that's that piece there. Okay, so that's piece A. Mine looks a bit, because I did have to lengthen mine. I didn't do a full toil, but I did a bit of a tissue fit on mine, just measuring how long, and I often have to lengthen the bodice piece. So we're just going to pin that in place around there, around the neckline. Do one end, the other end. And then we're going to stitch around stitch. Okay, so it doesn't say any difference. So all the seams are a centimetre seam allowance unless it says otherwise. So it doesn't say otherwise on this one. So this must be a centimetre seam allowance. This is just to put the this bit is just to put the elastic through. Okay, so that's just pinned around the neckline there. Okay, so we're just going to stitch around there, a centimetre seam allowance, and then do a 6mm seam allowance down these tie edges, and then we can turn that in the right way. Okay, so I'll do that next. Okay, so we've stitched that facing piece around the neckline, and then we've clipped the curves around there. Okay, and then I did press it towards the facing side and understitch it just to help it fold over, but it doesn't tell you to do that, so you don't have to, but I just thought it would help fold it over nice, keep that folded over nicely. But you're just going to have to get really tight to the seam, because you really haven't got much room there for when you've made your channel for your elastic to go through. Okay, so if you are going to understitch, you just need to get quite nice and tight to the seam there. Okay. Then this one, we just need to, we've stitched all down, 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down that tie, and then it tells you to put a pin in one end and then turn it out. So let's see if it works. Get the pin in there in the. I'm going to go and get a loop turner. What am I doing with this? Right, I'm going to go and grab a loop turner. Okay, so this thing here is a loop turner. Okay, so we're just going to shut up one end. Okay, and then with the little hook on the end, so you've got a little hook that goes down. Okay, this little one needs to go down. Okay, and then hook over top there. Okay, under your fabric edge, hook that bottom one up so that you've got it gripped in, and then pull it through. A bit of a fiddle, but once you get started on them, they're okay. You have to keep it under tension so you don't lose it. There you go. So once you get the end out, you can take that out. That's it. There we go. So you can just give that a nice press, and then that will be our tie, and it wants you to put that to one side. So I've done the neck edge around here. As I say, I've understitched that, so then it presses it over to the wrong side, and then we're going to stitch around this lower edge, leaving the channel for your elastic. We're going to pin that in place. Okay, so that's all pinned in place. I'm going to stitch around there and then press this loop, and then we'll thread our elastic through. Okay. Okay, so I stitched around the edge of the facing to secure that in place. Okay, and I have threaded my elastic. So I pinned, to measure your elastic, it's got the measurements in the front of the book here. So it's got all your measurements in there as to how long you want your piece of elastic to be, depending on what size you're doing. So just measure off the size using a tape measure. So I've done that. Attached a pin to one end and then threaded it through. And when you get so far and the side that the end of the elastic reaches the edge, make sure you pin that in place. Okay, so it doesn't, as you're threading it along, otherwise if you pull it tight, it'll just come straight back through out the other end. And then you'll have to probably start all over again. So I'm just going to tuck that back inside there, pin that in place. Just tuck that one in properly right along to the edge. There we go, right there. And then it wants you to stitch that in place. So I'm going to base stitch that in place, just stitch that well at those edges, just within the seam allowance. So just both sides of the end of the elastic there, and then we can even that out along. But I'll just stitch those in place first. And the next bit it wants you to do is to do your get piece B, which is your front yoke. These ones here, so you should have 4 of these. And then it wants you to put them right sides together, and then the short curved edge, which is the neckline edge here, it just wants you to stitch your seam allowance, so 1 centimetre seam allowance around both of those edges. Okay, and then it wants you to clip the curves and press the seam out. And then again, it doesn't ask you to understitch, but I am going to understitch mine. Okay, so I'll show you what I've done there. Okay, so I've stitched the ends of my elastic down. Okay, so that's all. It's a good idea then to give it a bit of a pull just so that it evens out your gathers, and then maybe just give it a little bit of a press. So put that to one side for a minute. Then I've stitched together these facing these yokes, piece B together at this curved seam, just notched into it and just graded the seam slightly. So I've just cut down one side smaller, one seam allowance smaller than the other, just so that you don't get such a ridge when you press it open. And then I have pressed the seam allowance towards oh, pins come out now. Press the seam allowance towards the what will be the underside of the yoke. Just making sure I've got that right, because I need to make sure. But in doing that, you just need to make sure that you've got one opposite the other. So I'm going to understitch along both of those. So that's the side I've pressed the seam allowance to the wrong side of the facing, and then I'm just going to understitch down both those edges. And then we're going to attach those yoke pieces to the front piece with the elastic that we've just sewn. Okay, so I'll go and do those first, and then we can attach those. Okay, so I've understitched. So when you're understitching, you're just going to stitch, I don't know if you can see that, I'm just going to stitch quite close to that seam allowance, just so that you're stitching that seam allowance over to the wrong side. Okay, right side, so that's fine. So join your notch up in the middle first, and then show you when I've pinned it, it'll be a bit easier to see then. Okay, so then we then wrap that edge around there. So again, the other notch of there, you want to join to there. Line those up at the bottom. So you're sandwiching your front piece between those two yokes. Okay, so like that along there. Okay, so you've got one side of your, each side of your yoke piece, okay, each side of your yoke piece wrapped around the front piece there. Okay, grade the seam allowance, which I'll show you how to do, and then press it all out. Okay, so we've stitched that down there, our centimetre seam allowance. Okay, so next it wants you to trim off the corner here. So just trim off a little bit of that bulk on that corner where your elastic and everything is. Not too tight to the corner, because it's, you know, under quite a bit of pull with the elastic around the neck, but just trim off some of the bulk. Then it wants you to layer your seam. So that's just so that when you've got 1, 2, 3 layers of fabric there, so if that's just within that seam, that will create a bit of a ridge. So to grade it, it just wants you to cut these seam allowances at different lengths. So ideally, the one you want to leave the longest is that's the one that's closest to the right side of the fabric. So you literally just trim off a little bit of the next one down, and then probably a little bit more of the one after that, as there's 3. And then the last one, just do a bit more. Oops, quite fiddly sometimes to get hold of them, but you can get some like duck-billed scissors that can be helpful for this. I've got some, they're upstairs, but it's quite easy to do without. Depends on your seams really and what sort of fabric you're using, but it's a she, can't get all the last bit now. There we go, right, okay. Let's just take a little bit more of that one, can't really see. So you can see what I mean. Okay, so then when you look at your seam, you've got 3 layers, the longest towards the front and the middle one, and then the next one down. And then you just pull that through to the right side, and then we just give that a press so that that's all sat neatly, like I've done with the other side. So that side's pressed, okay, sits quite neatly. I was almost there with my pattern matching, but that's fine. Okay, better on that side. So I'm going to give that a press, and then we're going to attach our 2 back yokes together, I believe, next. Yeah, so then we'll do that next. Okay. Okay, so that's all pressed out. So now we're just going to get piece E, which is the back yoke. Okay, and then we're going to put them, both those, because you have 2 of those pieces, we're going to put both pieces right sides of the fabric together and stitch a 1 centimetre seam allowance around the neckline. Okay, and then we're going to clip into the curves. I'm going to grade that a little bit, and then I'm going to understitch on the wrong side. So I'll do that next and show you what I've done. Okay, so I've stitched the collar round, okay, notched and graded the seams there, as you can see in there, okay, and then I've just understitched around the neckline edge, just so that I've attached the seam allowance to the back underneath yoke, inside yoke, okay. And then it wants you to attach your yoke piece to your, make sure I've got that the right way out, yeah, attach your yoke piece to the front shoulders of your, to the shoulders of your front piece, okay. So attach the shoulder like that on one side, okay. So you're sandwiching both layers of the yoke in between, okay. And then once you've pinned it one side, then you can wrap it around, much like you did with the other front yoke just now, and then pin that in place like so. So that one. So you just got to make sure, because you've got 4 layers there, just got to make sure you've got them all secured inside. I think that's fairly even. Okay, so I'm going to go and stitch those 2 in place, and then I can grade the seam allowance and then turn them right side out and give it a press. Okay, I'll clip the corners there as well. Okay, and then give it a press all towards the back yoke. Okay, and then it's gathering up the back yoke to fit in. So we'll see how I go. I might get time to do that today, I might not. Okay, so I've stitched both those shoulder seams, okay, and then I've graded the seam allowance like that, and then just clipped the corner off across here. Okay, done that both sides. So then you just turn that out so that your yoke is like that. Okay, and then I'm going to give that a press, and that's the back so far, but all your seams are encased within this. This is the wrong side, but all your seams are encased within these yokes here, so it's quite a nice finish. And then we're going to gather the back piece next. I'll give them a press in a second. And then, so the next piece is the bodice back, which is piece D. Okay, this piece here. And we are going to put some gather stitches in. So 2 rows of gather stitches from the notch here to the notch there. Okay, so between those 2 notches. All right, going to put 2 rows of gathering stitches. So that's just a long stitch on your machine along between those notches, so that we can gather that up to fit onto the back yoke. Okay, so I'll do that next. Okay, so I put 2 rows of gathering stitches between those 2 notches there. Okay, and then we want to get the outside piece of your back yoke, which is this one here, and then can't see any notches on there. So we just want to line up those edges at the end there. Just going to pin it in place until where those notches are, so where your gathering starts. So pin that in place first. Did I mark the centre? No. Let's just mark the centre of my back piece with a little snip. I'm also going to mark the centre. I haven't done already. No. Mark the back centre of the back piece there. Just helps you to get your gathering stitches a bit more even. So I pinned it up to where the notch is that side. I'm going to do the same thing this side. So pin those there. And I'm also going to pin it, so the centre back of my yoke I've just marked, and then the centre back of my back piece there. Okay, so that's what we've got so far. All right. So then I'm going to, what you do is you pull up your bobbin threads of your gathering stitches. And just pull those up. However much you need. So I've done a bit too much there, so if it's done a bit too much, just even it out. Okay, till you get the amount that you need. All right, and then when you've got the amount that you need, what I tend to do is to wrap those threads I've pulled up just in a figure of 8 around my needle there. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same on the other side. So bobbin thread, get hold of it, which I can't. Again, just do it to how much you need so that that sits flat along against there. And then when you've got how much you need, you can wrap those threads around your needle like that there, so then you know how much you've got. And then when you know how much gather you need, you can then sort of even it up, because we're missing a bit in the middle here. That needs to be moved along a bit. But without securing those thread ends, once you start sort of adjusting it, then you can then suddenly end up with too much again. So that's fairly even. Let's pin that in place. And then we do the other side here, so just a little bit more to go that way, a bit more to go that way. So that's fairly even. Get the edges together. Pin that in place. I'm going to stitch across there at a 6mm seam allowance, just to secure that all in place. All right, so along the top there, oops, pin the other yoke to it, hang on. Don't want to be doing that. So we only want the outside yoke at the moment. I'm going to catch the other one in there. Let's just take that out. Okay, so just along the top there. Okay, so this yoke is still separate at the moment. Okay, it's just that one yoke piece, the outer yoke piece. So I'm going to stitch that across at a 6mm seam allowance, and then we're going to roll it all up into the yoke to then stitch the other seam and then turn it out. Okay, so that's the first yoke stitched on. Okay, so now we want to roll that up. You roll it, it just helps it sit a bit more snug in there. You've got quite a bit to get in with your front piece as well. Okay, so that one wants to roll up like that. That's your yoke you've sewn. Okay, and then the front one, again, we want to roll up inside of there. Okay, and then this is our other yoke. Okay, that piece, just bring that in the centre a bit. So we've rolled the back yoke up into there, and then we've rolled the front up to sit on that yoke that we've just sewn. Okay, and then this piece, the other yoke, wraps over to there. Okay, so then we're going to secure those two together. I'm going to pin that. She says if she can go with a pin. On there. So just check you've got your layers together there. Okay, so that's sandwiched in between. So that's what you look like. You've got your 2 yoke pieces together with everything else rolled up in the middle of the yoke. Okay, it's often called the burrito method. So that's like that. So we're going to stitch along centimetre seam allowance now along to join those yokes together with the back piece sandwiched in between, and then we're going to grade the seam allowance, and I'll show you how we turn it in the right way. Okay, so that's stitched together along there, okay, and I've graded the seam allowance down slightly there, okay, and then it says to, so then you just turn it out through one of the side seams, so you literally just pull it through, like so. Oops. Okay, so then you've got your yoke piece sewn. Alright, that's the wrong side. Difficult to tell, the fabric's the same both sides. Right, so then so that's your yoke piece. So all those, that's the right side, and then that's the wrong side. So but all your seams are encased inside your yoke pieces, and again on here. So it's a really nice construction, how it goes together. So I'm going to give those a press, and I've just got some gathering stitches showing here, so I'll just take those out, and then tomorrow we'll go on to doing the flutter sleeves and hopefully the skirt. Okay, so that's all the base of the main part of the bodice finished, and that's the back so far. Okay, so next we're going to do the sleeves. So the first bit is to do the flutter sleeve if you're doing them, so I'll do that to show you. So that's piece F on your pattern pieces here. Let's move that tie out of the way. So first of all, you want to do a narrow hem along the straight edge of the flutter sleeve at the bottom. So just press up at 6mm and then again 6mm, and just stitch a narrow hem along the end there, like so. Okay, so I've done that on both of those, and then you just need to put some gathering stitches. So lengthen your stitch between a 3.5 to a 5, and then start from the notch there to the notch there, okay, on your pattern. So it's the notches here on your pattern. Okay, so you're going to just 2 rows of long gathering stitches in between there on both pieces, between those notches, and then we're gonna, oh, I've got a hair in my eye, and then we're gonna attach them to the sleeves, to the sleeve head. So they're symmetrical, aren't they? So it doesn't really matter. So I did put a notch in the centre of my, doesn't say to, but I did put a little notch in the centre there, so it can help line up evenly on the top here. So I've just got to think now, we want right sides together, don't we? So difficult to tell on my fabric. So that's right sides there. So I'm going to put that one, my notch first of all, at the shoulder seam. And then that notch should match up with that one there, with that notch on your sleeve head. And then that one down to there. So then that bit sits flat, but it is a curve. So take a couple of pins to get that to sit right. Okay, and then we'll join the notch again on the other side. Where is that? That is there. So a notch there. Just the threads out the way. Is on there. Right, I'll show you when I got it all together. That's it, so it finishes up. That's better. Okay, so then when you've pinned both sides, so matching your notches here, okay, which is at the end of your gathering, and then pin the remainder of that there, then that joins up to your, on the back it aligns with the yoke seam, and on the front it aligns with that front angled sort of raglan yoke seam there. Okay, and then we've got these, and I've also pinned it in the middle where I marked it, so then we've just got these bits in between here to gather in. So we'll just pull up our gathering stitches. A little way off that one. Just even it out so that it fits the gap there, and then like I said before, doing the yoke, I tend to tie mine around where I've got that, because I've got the right length, and then I can distribute that gather a bit more evenly without it coming undone, as it were. That's about it. So I'm going to pin that in place. Do the other side. I can show you what it all looks like. So then take the other side, the other end. It's easiest to do it each end rather than pulling up completely all along from one end where you've got it pinned in the middle. It's easier to get it a bit more even. So again, I've done a bit too much, so we'll just even that out, and then just anchor that, how much we pulled up the gathering around my pin, like so. And then once that's fixed, then we can just move these gathers along a bit. I think they're fairly even, like so. So then that's all pinned in place, okay, around there. So you've got, this is the wrong side, this is the right side, so that when you've got your sleeve head in, then that flutter goes over like so. Okay, so I'm going to do the other one. We'll stitch those in place, and then we're going to press up the hem of the sleeve, and then attach the sleeve. Okay, so I'll go and stitch these first. Okay, so we've our sleeves, we've sewn the, we've got to, so we've sewn the ruffles on there on the sleeve head, okay, like so. In there. All right, so we've done those. It's looking like that at the moment, so it should be looking like that, and then those will fold over like that a bit later. Okay, so next we're going to prepare the sleeves. So it wants you to press up 6mm hem, and then again where the fold is, where the your little notch on the side of your fabric on the sleeve, so here on there, it wants you to fold at that point there. Okay, so that creates that like there. So over to the wrong side, 6mm first, and then over again, so that on both sleeves, and then between the notches, so the notches are the single notches there, just at the top of your sleeve head, not the ones further down here, not those, okay, it's these two here. So just between those two, just want you to do 2 rows of gathering stitches. So again, a long stitch, 6mm in, and then about 6mm again away from that, just to get those gathering stitches there. And then we attach it to the sleeve head. So these sleeves are put in on what they call on the flat. So much like we've just done the ruffle, we're now going to attach the sleeve. So right sides together, put the pin on the right side of mine, so that's right, and that's the wrong sleeve. So I want this one right side down. There, it's falling out. So you'll have 2 notches that line up with the 2 notches on the back part of your sleeve. So line those, both of those up first. And you can check you've got the sleeve, the right sleeve on the right sleeve head that way. And again, as I say, it's right sides of your fabric together. Pin that in place. And then I'll do the same around the other side. So your single notch, joining your single notch on the front of your bodice, there, and then join it at the side seam. Pin in between. And then if you line up your notch at the start of your gathering with a notch on your sleeve head there. Oh, I can't get my pins out. There we go, got one. There, like so. And then we can just join that bit in between. So just those edges should sit sort of flush together. There's no gathering in this bit on the lower part of the sleeve. All the gatherings on the sleeve head at the top of the sleeve. Layers when you get to the ruffle, and again the same on this side. So find your notch on your sleeve head, and then the notch on your ruffle arm side bit there. So put that one in place, and then align this so that sits nice and flat. this just gets eased in between. So actually it's not much of a gather, it's really just easing in that sleeve head. Okay, so I pull them up slightly just so that it gives a little bit of ease around that sleeve head, but it needs very little at all really. It's not gathered, it's just eased in around this sleeve head, so that's enough. So I'll just join those layers together there. You've got quite a few layers to pin together here because you've got your ruffle in between with those gathers, so there's lots of pins to make sure it's all sat nice and flat. Oh, I've got my microphone. Quite a few pins. I pin lots on the sleeve just to check it all aligns and sits flat and then you don't get any puckers. So that's the sleeve pinned in. Okay, so I'm going to do exactly the same. I'm going to probably stitch that one first and then do exactly the same with the other side. So we're going to stitch around there at a 1 centimetre seam allowance, and then we'll need to neaten the seam. We'll sew both those in, and then it's attaching the sleeves and the side seams, which I'll show you next. Okay, so that's the sleeves sewn in on the flat. So they're sewn in place and then overlocked around. Okay, so that's, and then just make sure that your ruffles press down towards the sleeve. Okay, so then once we've done that, we're going to stitch the sleeves and the side seams. So right sides together. So lay the front bodice over the back. So right sides together. Line up your underarm seam under here. And line up the bottom. There. In between. And line up your sleeves, just unfolding where you've pressed up. And then just pin, always pin either end, then just make sure it's all laid flat. And you can pin in the middle and then pin in between there. And if you do it that way, it just makes sure, otherwise if you start pinning from the top and then go all the way down, sometimes you've got a discrepancy at the end. So it can just help to make sure that it's all fitting in correctly. Okay, so we've got that pinned, so that's pinned down the side seam there, short side seam there, and then along down this long sleeve seam there. Okay, so I'm going to do the same for the other side, stitch those and then overlock them and then press it towards the back. Yeah, and then I'll press the seam towards the back. Okay, and then we're going to do the cuffs and the elastic on the top. Okay, so that's the side seams sewn up there, and then I've overlocked those. Okay, so the side seam and the sleeve seam. Then it wants you to press up, so where you pressed and folded before, it wants you to fold up your 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then up where you folded it, where the notches were on your pattern edges. Okay, so just fold that up and pin that in place. Then we're going to stitch around right along the edge of here. We're just going to leave about a 5 centimetre gap. I probably won't leave as much as 5 centimetres, I'll probably leave about 3 centimetres, just so that we can get the elastic through later on. Okay, so the first row stitching along here, you leave a gap of about, it says 5 centimetres, I'll probably do 3. And then again, you're going to stitch another, when you've done that, you're going to stitch another row of stitching just down, further down here from that, about 1/2 inch away. And you're going to stitch all the way around that. You don't need to leave a gap in that one. It's just this one you need to leave the gap to get the, whilst you get the elastic in. So I'm going to go and do those two, and then we'll put the elastic in. I've stitched around close to the edge there, left a gap somewhere there, left a gap there, and then stitched about 1/2 inch away all the way around. And then it wants you to get your pieces of elastic for your cuff. Now again, where it said for your elastic for the neck piece, it also has it suggested here for the sleeve hem. Okay, so I've measured off using a tape measure, measured off how much elastic it suggests. Oh, excuse me. And then I'm going to threadle it, pop a pin on the end. Excuse me. And then tickling my throat, and then thread it through the gap in your sleeve bit there that you've just sewn. So once you get it going, it's not too bad. So again, when you're threading it through, once you've got it a little way, and the end of your elastic, the end of your elastic is here, then just pin that in place and then carry on round doing the rest. Then when you get round to the other side, just overlap your edges by about 1/2 inch, and then I've just pinned that in place, pinned my elastic together. Trying to get it out, show you. Pinned my elastic together there. Okay, and then I've just sort of evened that out a little bit and just try it on there just to check that's right. So that's about right. I don't like it too tight, so I reckon that's just about right on there. Okay, so then you can just stitch together the ends of your elastic, and then you're going to stitch down the seam that's open a little bit. So we'll do that next, and then it's on to the skirt piece.